we are going to wait until the end of the presentation to answer questions. So you're free to type in your questions because you are in listen-only mode. So please type them in the chat message section of your webinar menu, and we'll answer those, as many as we can, at the end of the presentation. So for those of you that maybe don't have the time to stay on for the question and answer section, you're welcome to go, but we will try to answer as many as possible. This training has also been approved for 1.5 hours of Advocare external training credits. So for those of you attending today that are case managers, you should submit the confirmation of attendance per the Advocare instructions to receive that credit. And we typically you'll receive that confirmation of attendance email usually the day following the presentation. So if you do not receive it, then please let us know and we will get that to you. But usually that is sent out the day following the presentation. I'm very excited to be able to welcome Cathy Boswell and Tony Moglin today. Both ladies are from InSource, and they will be presenting the information related to bullying prevention. Cathy is the Regional Program Specialist for InSource, and InSource is Indiana's Resource Center for Families with Special Needs. Cathy is a former foster and adoptive parent trainer and is currently serving as a volunteer court-appointed special advocate. Cathy is also the adoptive parent of a young adult with disabilities. She's a graduate of Purdue University and has been employed with InSource for nearly 8 years, serving families in the Northwest region of Indiana. Tony is also a regional program specialist with InSource, serving the Lake County area. She's been with InSource for 2.5 years. She's the parent of 2 children, one of whom does have a diagnosis of autism. She's also a former school board member for the Lake Ridge School Corporation. So I'm very excited to welcome both Cathy and Tony today. So they have a lot of good information to share with us. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to them, and we'll get started. Thank you very much. Hi, Cathy, this is Lana. If you're speaking, we cannot yet hear you, so you might still be on mute.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay, I lost my name with the little place that I was going to click to unmute myself. So I had to do some scrambling. I apologize for the delay.
That's all right.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Cathy Boswell. I'd like to welcome you to the Indiana Bullying Prevention Training Project for parents. The Indiana Protection and Advocacy Services of Indiana provided a grant to InSource so that we could make this training available to parents, staff, and other interested parties. And of course, we would like to thank IPMG for the invitation to come and do this presentation for their families, their staff, and others that are interested. Always happy to talk to folks about special education and about this particular topic, which is very timely. You don't have to listen to the news for very long to hear about incidents of bullying and some of the pretty horrific aftermath that can occur. So this is a very timely topic, and I appreciate your interest. This training was developed by the PACER Center. PACER Center is out of Minnesota. All states are required to have what's called a Parent Training and Information Center, and PACER is in fact InSource's counterpart up in Minnesota. In 2006, PACER founded the National Bullying Prevention Center to educate communities, not just in their state, but nationwide, about bullying. If you've never been to their website, I would strongly encourage you to go there. They have a lot of resources that are available about bullying and other topics related to disabilities that are available to be downloaded. We've also got some of, or many of those resources on our website, insource.org. If you haven't checked us out recently, we've redesigned our website, and it's a lot more user-friendly, and I just think it's pretty neat, so I hope you'll go there too. We did share a few of those resources with you. There are a lot more that are available, and I would strongly encourage you to explore these websites and look at some of these resources and download the ones that you're interested in. Our agenda today, we've broadly divided it into 3 sections. We're going to talk first about the dynamics of bullying. Then we're going to talk about what parents and others can do about bullying. And then we're going to specifically address parents that have children with disabilities and some issues that are specific to those children. And within our first section, the dynamics of bullying, we're going to address the definition of bullying per the state of Indiana. We're going to look at some of the common views that are held about bullying, look a little bit about some of the characteristics of kids who bully, and then who tend to be the typical targets of bullying. First, we're going to start by looking at House Enrolled Act 1423. One of the handouts that we submitted was a summary of this House bill, and again, I would strongly encourage you to print it off and to become familiar with it, because you need to know the law. This is a pretty significant law for Indiana. You'll notice there's some wording that is bolded, and the bolded wording is words that were added to the original definition to strengthen the law or to make it more robust, as they like to say. But for the state of Indiana, this is how we now define bullying, and this is important that you know, just as it's important that schools know, because there's a lot of things that are required now, investigations and what have you, so we need to have a good firm definition of what constitutes bullying. So just kind of briefly, it's defined as overt, unwanted, repeated acts or gestures, verbal or written communication, images that are transmitted electronically or digitally, physical acts, aggression, or any other behaviors that are committed by others against a targeted student with the intent, and that intent is important, with the intent to harass, to ridicule, to humiliate, to intimidate or harm the targeted student, and that creates a hostile school environment that makes a targeted student afraid for himself or herself or their possessions or property, or has a substantially detrimental effect on the targeted student's physical and mental health, substantially interferes with the targeted student's academic performance or their ability to participate in or benefit from services provided by the school. So that's a very, very comprehensive definition, and again, I want to encourage you to become familiar with it, because if your child has in fact been targeted by a bully, you need to know this definition to try to determine, is what happened actually meeting this definition, because rest assured, this is the definition the school will be using in making a determination of whether or not a bullying incident actually occurred. Before we go into bullying more fully, there are always questions about what's the difference between bullying and typical conflict between students. between children. Children fight about things. They fuss about things. I want to go first. No, I want to go first. I want to play with this car. No, I want to play with this car. If you're a parent or a grandparent, you've been around kids or a teacher, you know that type of conflict is very typical. But when we define conflict, typically that occurs between two students who would be considered to be roughly to have roughly equal power in a relationship, roughly equal in size, equal in social standing, equal in cognitive ability, equal in social skills. We know that most children develop empathy at a relatively early age. And because of this empathy, they learn to monitor their own behavior, to recognize when maybe they've hurt another child, and then modify their response, or modify their behavior in response to recognizing that this was not right. But when we're talking about bullying, bullying usually involves some type of real or perceived power differential. Bullies typically lack the empathy that other kids have and intentionally inflict harm of some sort on the targeted student. Their intent is to create harm. It isn't normal, harmless conflict, I want it, no, I want that. We know bullies often get a sense of power and control from bullying other students. For the past 20 years or so, and I'm just kind of guessing at that from what I remember from my own children, we've heard a lot about conflict resolution. And it was a program that was used, and probably continues to be used in schools, to teach children how to resolve disagreements, to work out conflicts. That's a wonderful skill to have. We have a lot of adults that haven't mastered that yet. And so teaching our children how to use conflict resolution is great. But unfortunately, it's been misused in situations where it really wasn't a conflict event, it was a bullying event. And the reason that it's not effective is because bullying isn't about conflict. It's about the purposeful intention of harming another person, verbally or physically. And you know, harming a target that the bully perceives as being inferior in some way. Conflict resolution strategies can send the message that both parties are partly wrong. When you're sitting across the table from someone that you're in conflict with, the assumption is you both played a role in this event. But in a bullying situation, nothing is further from the truth. You don't have two equals sitting across the table from one another. You have a victim, and then you have a perpetrator, or a bully, if you would. When you think about law enforcement, if someone robbed you, the police don't typically sit you across from whoever it was that committed the crime against you and asked you to work out that agreement, to work out some sort of arrangement or some agreement. There is a victim and there is a perpetrator, and it is not the same as what we would consider to be normal conflict. It's important that the target of the bully, the victim, understands that it is not their fault and that they will be protected, and it's equally important that the bully comes to understand that what he or she did was wrong and that there be consequences for that behavior, and then some education to go along to try to prevent that from happening in the future. All right. We talk about bullying. Bullying is a really big issue for us because we've seen very close and up front the impact that bullying has on children. It's not a harmless rite of passage that, you know, kids do it, and so it's normal. When we look in terms of the impact that bullying has on children, it's very difficult to consider it to be a harmless rite of passage because it's not. We know that bullying can negatively impact a child's access to education. We find kids that are being bullied are reluctant to go to school. They experience difficulty concentrating when they're in school on their homework. They start losing interest in academic achievement because their focus is not on learning to read and learning to write. It's trying to develop a strategy to avoid the bullies that are out in the hallway. And because of that, we see the grades very often start to slip. And unfortunately, as kids get older, these are the kids, many of these kids will drop out of school, again, avoiding a very stressful and harmful situation. So does bullying impact children's education? It absolutely does. Another area that bullying impacts is that of health. We know it leads to physical and mental health problems. Things like headaches and stomach aches. We mentioned avoiding school. Well, a parent that has a child that is being bullied can attest to frequent mornings where I have a headache, I have a stomach ache, I don't feel good. And that might even start the night before. They will often develop sleeping problems, so they're difficult to get up and out in the morning. They're having sleeping problems, again, because of the stress that they're experiencing. Some mental health problems would include a decrease in self-esteem. These kids don't feel good about themselves. An increase in fear and anxiety. They often become depressed. They often may start self-isolating. They'll start keeping to themselves, staying away from peers. We also see sometimes increased aggression, and that's something that we're going to talk about in a little bit. You know, how a child that's bullied sometimes becomes a bully in response. Some kids will start self-harming, such as cutting, as a way to relieve the pain and the stress that they're undergoing. And these kids often have thoughts of suicide. They think about taking their own lives as a way to escape a situation that they see no end to. Another area of impact is that of safety. In addition to all of those other mental health and physical issues that I just mentioned, you know, we mentioned self-harm and the fact that some kids do think about suicide. Unfortunately, many kids do in fact commit suicide. Pretty much every week you're hearing on the news of a child somewhere that committed suicide. And we're talking younger children, we're talking kids 12, you know, and sometimes even younger, that have taken their lives. They're not just thinking about it, they're doing it as a direct result of years of having been bullied by others. Sometimes these kids develop, they feel alienated from the school. They don't feel like they fit in anymore. They don't feel that connectedness that's so important to our society and to our communities. And sometimes that increased aggression that we mentioned earlier will take the form of going back to the school with weapons and taking their revenge on not just those that they believe bullied them, but on other people as well. And so it becomes then a safety issue, not just for the student that's being bullied, but for other students that are in that school community as well. So we can't deny that bullying has a significant impact on students. We're going to look briefly at various types of bullying. There's verbal, there's of course physical, there's emotional or social, there's sexual bullying, and then there's cyberbullying. Tony's going to talk more about cyberbullying in her section, but I'm going to address the other four first. When we talk about verbal bullying, well, of course, there's the normal list. You get the teasing, the name calling, making threats or trying to intimidate another student, making demeaning jokes about the differences between kids, whether it's your hair, your skin color, your disability, whatever it might be. And then there's, of course, spreading rumors and gossip about others. Now, some people take issue with teasing. Teasing is, you know, somewhat normal to a certain extent, but teasing is not really teasing if the student that's being teased doesn't understand that they're being teased, and if in fact the intent of teasing is to create harm or distress in some way. At that point, teasing then becomes a form of bullying. We see that most verbal bullying tends to peak in middle school. Boy, I wondered why I hated middle school. But then it tends to decrease as kids go into high school, because kids, you know, they start to mature, they become more socially conscious and more accepting of the differences of others. And I say most kids, obviously we have a lot of adults that still engage in behavior like this that didn't quite grow up, I guess. Then we look at physical bullying. And of course, you know, that's very easy to recognize. We recognize when someone's being hit or kicked or pushed, if something's being thrown. I would like to interject, taking and damaging property is considered to be a type of physical bullying. How many parents have you had your child come home to say, you know, they had their little, you know, handheld game taken by another student, or somebody's always trying to get their lunch money from them and does in fact get their lunch money from them because they're being threatened. They keep losing their backpack. They keep losing something that you're sending, and you come to find out somebody's taking it from them against your child's will. That's considered to be a type of bullying. How many kids have to run the gauntlet to get into the bathroom or to get out of the bathroom because there's somebody or a group of people, a group of students that are harassing them or bullying them, teasing them, taunting them in some way, somehow denying them access into a bathroom, even into a classroom. That's considered to be physical bullying. And psyching, you probably all know what I mean. You take your fingers and kind of flick them in somebody's face. That can be considered to be a type of bullying, especially, again, the intent has to be there to frighten somebody. And usually when a bully is called out on that behavior, the response is, well, I didn't touch them. Well, you didn't have to touch them. You made them flinch, you made them, they jerked back because they were afraid they were going to get hit. And that can rise to the level of bullying, a type of physical bullying. And I think that that's important to note. Then we look at the emotional types of bullying or social bullying. And we ladies, unfortunately, know this. Again, junior high was the pits. What can I say? Especially around that age, we get purposely ignoring somebody when we're angry. And that can happen as a group of students, or that can happen individually. Spreading rumors about someone, again, to create that emotional distress, that embarrassment. Telling others not to play with someone that we're mad at for whatever reason. Don't play with them, so we alienate them from the group, and excluding others from group is a part of that. Damaging the target's reputation, again, that kind of falls back with the spreading rumors, saying things about them. You know, when kids are that young, they tend to be very open and honest with their friends, and I put that in quotation marks sometimes, and tell them things that perhaps they haven't told others. But then if that friend that they told gets angry with them or decides to get even for some reason, suddenly your child's secrets are out there for the public in a very, very public way, and which can cause a great deal of distress and humiliation to your child. And emotional bullying, it tends to be very sophisticated. It's not always easy to spot, and it's usually done in groups. And it's devastating to children because it tends to damage a child's relationship with their peers, and they often find themselves not being socially accepted. They're on the outs, and for kids, especially in junior high and high school, feeling like you're a part of the group is very, very important to your self-esteem. And to be bullied in this way and basically putting you on the outs is very damaging psychologically. And then there's sexual abuse. Parents, you really need to become familiar with your students' handbooks on what constitutes appropriate touch. And of course, we really need to have those conversations with our own children, especially if you're the parent of a child with a disability who may not understand boundaries very well. Make sure you're having that discussion about what body parts are appropriate to touch on other people. But when we talk about bullying in a sexual manner, we're talking about sexually charged comments that are made to another that are offensive, inappropriate or lewd glances, you know, staring at a target's breasts or genitalia, you know, even with the clothes on, you know, being very pointed and very exaggerated. It's very embarrassing. And then, of course, inappropriate physical contact, such as butt smacking. I mean, friends do it sometimes, but you need to be very careful. And exhibitionism, forcing others to look at your body parts that are really not intended for public display. could be considered a type of sexual bullying. And then, of course, there's sexual assault, which, is inappropriately touching the body parts of others, or, even to the point of committing rape. That not only is bullying, but that's also a crime. So, again, refer to your student handbook for, school's definition of what's considered appropriate or inappropriate touching. And so this is just kind of, laying out generally what would be behaviors that would be considered to be bullying of a sexual nature. There are a lot of views and myths that tend to perpetuate the cycle of bullying. The first one is, of course, that bullying is a natural part of childhood. Most of us went to school, I would imagine, if not all of us, and I'm pretty sure I can say that we either witnessed bullying, we were bullied ourselves, or perhaps we did some bullying. If you've been in school, you know what's out there, and you know what happens. And unfortunately, as adults now, we're far away from it, but there are still a lot of parents that think that, well, that's been going on since the beginning of time. It's just one of those natural rights of childhood that kids have to go through. But I would suggest to you that there really is nothing natural about bullying. The fact of the matter is, if some of these behaviors were engaged in by one adult against another, it might even reach, it could conceivably be a crime. And so to think that some of these behaviors should be acceptable because it's a child against a child, just because it's always happened that way, just really doesn't make good sense. Physical or emotional aggression toward any other shouldn't be considered normal, or shouldn't be tolerated as a normal part of childhood. Another common view is that words won't hurt you. Well, I didn't physically hurt him, it was just words. Well, we all know how untrue that is. Words do hurt. They don't leave physical bruises, but they leave psychic wounds on us. We don't forget words. You're stupid, you're ugly, you're fill in the blank. Kids take that to heart, and it is very painful, and it does cause scars, emotional scars on kids. And kids learn very early on how powerful words can be. Another common view is that some people deserve to be bullied. Well, no, actually they don't. No child's behavior, the way they look, the way they act, would ever justify that child being bullied. All children deserve to be treated with respect and consideration. Some people struggle with this a little bit because, well, my child was being bullied and he responded, and then they charged my child with bullying. Well, again, no matter what the provocation is, even if your child is being bullied, responding by bullying in return is not a correct response. There does need to be action taken, but turning a child into a bully themselves is not the correct one. Nobody deserves to be bullied. Another common misconception is that bullying makes kids tougher. The fact of the matter is it often has the opposite effect, again, lowering the child's self-esteem and their feelings of self-worth. And bullying does create fear and anxiety for a child. And I just don't see how that could be considered making a child tougher. Another is telling a teacher about bullying that's tattling, so you shouldn't tell. Well, it's important that we help our children to understand the difference between tattling and telling. Tattling is done by kids to get another student in trouble, but telling is done to protect someone. Folks, there's a lot of secrecy that goes around bullying. If you've ever had a child that's bullying, I'm guessing you didn't hear about that event until it had happened many, many times. Kids don't always tell. There's too much secrecy around it, and that secrecy tends to protect the bully, and it tends to perpetuate the behavior. So children need to understand the difference between tattling, which we don't like, and telling, which we do, because there should be no secrets, and certainly telling to protect yourself or to protect another child is more than appropriate. And then teasing, and I did talk about that earlier. It's only teasing if the child understands it to be teasing and the intent is for fun. If the child doesn't understand it as teasing and the intention is to hurt that child in some way, teasing then meets the criteria to be for bullying. Okay. Another thing I wanted to address about common myths that wasn't on your screen. There really is a very common misconception that kids who bully are mostly loners and really don't have good social skills. That's why they bully. That's not really the truth usually. Most kids who bully usually don't lack for friends at all. In fact, these kids tend to have a larger friendship networks than other kids. And importantly, they usually have at least a small group of friends who support and encourage their bullying. And so they kind of perpetuate that. The bully wants to impress this small group of friends who support and encourage it. And unfortunately, kids who bully often tend to have more leadership skills than their target. So we view leadership skills as being something very positive. In this case, for a bully, it kind of perpetuates some of those bullying events. So I just kind of wanted to add that as an additional myth that I think we need to bust, if you will. So let's talk a little bit about who bullies and why. We know that students can be of any size, shape, age, or gender. Typically, we perceive bullies as somebody who's a lot bigger. You know, we got this really big kid and then this really little one, and the big kid does the bullying. Well, that does in fact happen. But it can be the little kid bullying the big kid as well, so you can't necessarily just go by size, because they come in all size, shapes, religions, genders. They can be very popular students, or they may be in the out group. They've been rejected by that in group. But the common denominator that all bullies share is that they lack empathy for those that they target. They can't enter into the feelings of somebody else, and that's a significant problem. So what characteristics do these kids have? What characteristics do they tend to share? Very often they have a very powerful feeling of dislike. They feel contempt towards someone that they feel is somehow worthless or inferior to them. I'm bigger than you, I'm better than you, I'm whatever, and I don't like you. They somehow feel this target is undeserving of their respect. Bullies often tend to have a sense of entitlement or an intolerance towards others' differences. These children who bully seek to demonstrate power, and they want to feel in control. They can be aggressive, they can be physically stronger, they can be remorseless and intentional, and I can't stress enough, intentional in their wanting to harm others. There's intent there. Children bully because it sometimes makes them feel more confident. It makes them feel like they're in charge. It helps them to feel connected, often to that small group of friends that encourage the bullying behavior. And then, of course, there's the child that might bully because they themselves have been bullied and they've become aggressive themselves and now are bullying others. And then who is the student that is typically targeted by bullying? Again, there's really no typical profile for someone who might be the subject of bullying, but they do share some common characteristics. And these characteristics often are the ones that tend to attract bullies. Children who are bullied might struggle to defend themselves. They might be smaller physically. They may not be very verbal, so they can't defend themselves verbally. They often provide that emotional reaction that bullies often thrive on, that makes them feel more powerful. Kids get mad, they become angry, they might be scared, they might cry, but they demonstrate those emotions or those reactions, and it reinforces or perpetuates that type of bullying. These kids who are targets often have few or no close friends. They might also be socially isolated. We know that kids that have at least one close friend are less likely to be targeted by a bully, because usually if you're with friends, if you have friends, even one, that friend might actually defend you and kind of stop some of that bullying behavior. bullies tend to recognize the vulnerability of these kids. An isolated kid with nobody around to speak up for them, to help them, is a perfect target. When you think about in nature, when the lions are going after the, the herd of deer or elk or whatever it is, they don't go for the whole herd. They go for the one who's fallen back, who's become somewhat isolated, and the same thing is true for bullies. They look for the weakness and what they perceive as weakness. These kids who are targeted also tend to avoid being noticed. It's really easy to target somebody who's pretty unassertive and is easily dominated. Again, that control, that sense of control, it just aggravates that bullying. And then a child who's targeted for bullying also may have difficulty communicating. They may not be very verbal. They may be nonverbal, so they have no way to even speak up or to tell anybody what's happening or to speak back. And they also may have difficulty reading social cues, especially nonverbal. And we see this a lot with many of our kids with disabilities. They don't understand what's happening, and they're very easy to be taken advantage of. I had mentioned earlier that one of the health and safety concerns for children who are targets of bullying is that sometimes they become very aggressive themselves. And when they start fighting back that way, if you will, they start trying to bully others in response. And we call that reactive bullying. And this is when the student is both the target and then bullies in response. And while many people might feel like that's a form of self-defense, it's important to remember that nobody deserves to be bullied. What we're trying to do is to put in place a plan so that when bullying occurs, the adults can deal with it and deal with it appropriately, so that no student ever feels as though they have to take it upon themselves to protect and to defend themselves. Okay. Now, in this section, this is section 2, we're going to start talking about what parents can do and what others can do. And we're going to go through action steps for the parents and then action steps for parents and for students. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the steps that parents can take, such as knowing the law, record keeping, and then we're going to talk about a template letter, a form that you might want to use to report a bullying incident to the school. I need to encourage you to recognize that there really is no one-size-fits-all solution. And so, just as children are individual, so are situations of bullying, and that the response needs to be individualized to fit their child's situation and their skills. This should look familiar. House Enrolled Act 1423, and now I'm just going to go through and explain a little bit about some of these significant changes that came about in July of last year in the state of Indiana. Now, this summary, and again, you've got this summary, and I would encourage you to read through it. The Department of Ed has required schools to develop guidelines, to develop and implement bullying prevention programs, as well as investigating and reporting procedures that are related to bullying, and the discipline rules, discipline being applied to the bully, that are required by current state statute. And schools are now required to add the number and nature of bullying incidents to their student safety reports. So is Indiana taking bullying seriously? You bet they are. So let's look a little bit more in detail about this. Schools are required to improve the school climate, and so corporations now are required to provide training to employees and any volunteers that work with our kids that have direct ongoing contact. They have to be trained in the school's bullying prevention and reporting policy. So all adults are going to be held accountable for what happens. They need to be aware of the law. They need to be aware of the definition of bullying. They need to be made aware of the reporting requirements, because they're going to be required to report and to enforce. Public schools are also going to have to provide age-appropriate instruction that focuses on bullying prevention for kids ages 1 through 12. Now you may say, well, they've been doing that for years. Well, my thought is it's probably going to be a little more intensive, this instruction that's going to be provided. And I think there's going to be some more teeth behind all of this. With this new and improved law, everybody's taking bullying very seriously. And so hopefully we're going to get some really good prevention programs going in our schools. And it's also, the law is going to suggest that bullying prevention instruction be provided by the school safety specialist or the school counselor, or basically anyone that is trained and has the knowledge and expertise in bullying to lead these programs, and hopefully to provide staff training as well. Okay, this also clarifies how to address bullying incidents, and there's discipline rules that have to be included. In other words, what happens if a child is found to be bullying, what happens if an incident isn't reported by the school. There will be consequences for those, so that needs to be included. But within the new school policies, it has to contain a procedures for the expedited investigation of bullying incidents, including appropriate responses to bullying behaviors wherever the behavior occurs, provisions for anonymous and personal reporting of bullying to a teacher or other school staff. In other words, where can kids go to report bullying incidents, and parents as well. They also have to develop a timetable for reporting bullying incidents to the parents of both the targeted student and the student who is bullying. So parents can expect to get a report from the school. Actually, now in Indiana, it's within 24 hours of that incident being reported. So both parents will be notified about it. There should be timetables for reporting bullying incidents to school counselors and other school staff, and if necessary, to law enforcement. As I mentioned earlier, some bullying incidents actually break the law, and as such need to be reported to law enforcement. And then what exactly are going to be those discipline procedures for teachers or staff or other administrators that do not, who fail to report or to initiate an investigation. So investigations have to happen. And then, of course, provisions for false reporting of bullying. And then there needs to be a detailed procedure for follow-up. What sort of support services are we going to provide for the victim? And then what sort of education are we going to provide to the bully? Because obviously we want the bully to learn not to bully anymore. I mentioned that parental notification has to happen within 24 hours after the school receives a report of bullying, and the Department of Education is required to periodically review all school policies to make sure that they are in compliance with House Enrolled Act 1423. Also, something that is very interesting, it used to be that a bullying incident would only be investigated by the school if it happened on school property, at a school-related event, or perhaps on a school bus. House Enrolled Act 1423 changed that a little bit, and basically these discipline rules, all of this is to be applied regardless of the physical location in which the bullying behavior occurred. So if the individual committing the bullying and the target are both students of this school corporation, if it happened at the mall, if it happened digitally or electronically, wherever it happened, it's considered to be an incident of bullying, and it has to be reported, and it has to be investigated. So it doesn't matter if it happened at the mall, it doesn't matter if it happened at a community function that had nothing to do with the school. If it's reported, it has to be investigated by the school. And there's that component, again, if both students are students within the same school corporation. And also if it's considered that disciplinary action is reasonably necessary to avoid substantial interference with school discipline or to prevent an unreasonable threat to the rights of the student or the safety of others. So that's a really, really important piece of information, folks. It doesn't matter where it happened. You need to report it if you become aware of it. It's important that if your child reports that they've been bullied to you as a parent, that you keep a record of it. And as in all good record keeping, there are certain components that you want to have in place. Obviously, you want to do a summary of what your child told you, the date of the event, the people that were involved in the event, and you're going to create a record. And in a moment, I'm going to talk about that template letter for reporting. But while the template letter for reporting is important, it's important that you document as your child is sharing with you what happened. And in addition to writing down your child's version of what happened and the appropriate information, once you have reported it to the school, if you choose to, you really need to keep track of all communication between you and the school. What did you send to the school? Keep a copy of it. What was the school's response? Keep a copy of it. Dates and times and a summary of the discussion if it is not written. What was the response to the person that I reported this to? If your child has physical marks such as bruises, you may want to take a picture of it to help document the event. If you have to take your child to the doctor, that could become a part of the report. Your child was injured in some way that required medical care. That can be included. If you had to take your child to a psychiatrist or a psychologist because it caused such mental distress, that needs to be documented as well. Because if you'll remember from the definition, there are certain criteria that have to be met. It has to be shown to have a physical or mental effect on a child or to make the child afraid. And this is just part of your documentation in establishing that this did in fact reach the level of what would be considered to be bullying. So again, keeping good records is very, very important. And the last piece that I want to share with you is a template letter. That also came to you as a handout. There are 3 template forms. And again, these are just suggestions. Most parents aren't comfortable writing letters. It does provide you with, kind of some guidance as you put yours together. The first letter is that for a child that's just in general education. He isn't in special ed. Just outlining the events, what happened, what you would like to see happen, and asking perhaps for an investigation. The second letter could be used for a child that has a Section 504 plan. That child is considered to be a child with a disability, and so you may choose to use that form if your child has a Section 504 plan. Or if you have a child in special education and he has an IEP, you may choose to use the third letter. And Tony is going to talk more in detail about how bullying can be particularly harmful to children with disabilities, and that it might in fact require a different response. And I don't want to go into Tony's section at this point, but again, if you choose to report a bullying incident, you can use this sample, this template, but whatever you do, make sure you make a copy for yourself, for your records, and that you keep detailed records of contact with administrators and whoever else might be involved as a way of documenting the event. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the screen over to Tony. I hope I'm doing this right. Okay. Okay. Change presenters. Oh, here we go.
Okay, awesome. Okay, hi, I'm Tony. I'm going to take over and we're going to start talking about talking with your child about bullying. And as you see from the statistics on your screen, 64% of children who were bullied did not report it. So only 36% of children who are bullied report it. So we're going to talk about strategies that we can use to encourage our children to speak about being bullied, or if they have experienced bullying. First of all, it's very important to listen. If your child's going to be speaking to you about bullying, it's their story, so let them tell it. They might be in emotional pain about the way that they're being treated. So if your child is telling you that they're being bullied, he or she needs your help, so listen. It's also important to believe them. Perception is reality. So the knowledge that a child's being bullied can be emotionally painful. In order for us to be an effective advocate, we need to react in a way that encourages them to trust us and to continue to tell us about it, and to just encourage them that we do believe what they're saying. We need to be supportive and make sure that they know that if they are experiencing bullying, it's not their fault. They don't deserve to be bullied. Nobody does. So we should be empowering them and avoid judgmental comments about our own child or even the child who's bullying. Our child may already be feeling isolated, and if they hear negative statements from parents, that might further isolate them. We need to be patient because our children may not be ready to completely open up right away. So talking about the bullying may be difficult. They might be scared. They might fear retaliation from the bully, or believe that even if they tell an adult, nothing's going to change. And they might be feeling insecure or frightened or maybe even ashamed about the situation. So we need to educate our child about bullying and provide information at their level so that they can understand the information. We can help them explore options to intervene, and we can discuss with them the options they may have to deal with bullying behavior. Later on, we're going to talk about a student action plan, so that's a great way to help encourage that conversation. So why may students not tell their parents or tell an adult if they're being bullied? I know if your parents are anything like my mom, I was always afraid of her overreaction with anything. So that's one of the main reasons, is they're afraid that we might overreact or try to fix the situation. And sometimes they just want to be listened to and be part of the solution. So most likely they don't want their parents, to call the school or call the child's parents. They just want them to listen. They might fear that they'll be judged because they're being bullied, or they might be embarrassed. The bullying might be due to a situation where maybe they've done something inappropriate, or maybe they're being called something inappropriate. So that might be hard for them to talk to their parents about. And some students, they find it difficult to talk with their parents about their feelings or emotions and ideas. They might be ashamed. Depending on the length of the bullying, that person may have already succeeded in convincing them that they deserve it, that they deserve to be bullied. And they may have come to believe the misguided message that if only they stood up to the bully once, the bullying would stop. How many times have we heard that before? You just stand up to them. So as a result of that, they may feel weak because they couldn't stop it on their own. They may have found that telling adults does no good. They might have already told an adult in the past, and maybe the adults didn't believe them, or they blamed them, or they told them, to stop tattling, or, they give them advice that hasn't necessarily worked. And they may not believe that adults will keep them safe or protect them from retaliation for telling. So again, that fear of that retaliation. And they might, excuse me, especially for boys, they might have been convinced that, if you tell, you're not being macho, you're not being a real man, and that asking for help is, a sign of immaturity. They may not be convinced that the adults care about stopping bullying because they might have seen adults witness bullying without doing anything about it. And that part's really sad to me. I coach a Girls on the Run team, which is for 3rd through 5th grade girls, and you would be surprised how often that particular comment comes up, that they've seen adults see this happening and they don't do anything about it. So why would they tell them? So some things to maybe avoid when talking with your child about bullying, and while some of these reactions, I know they express genuine caring and concern and good intentions, and they often reflect what we might have been told by our own parents, but some of these strategies might be ineffective. So parents may feel better for having taken action, but some of these reactions can actually have harmful consequences. So when we tell our child to, just stand up to the bully, just fight back, this could just really imply that it's the child's responsibility to handle the situation. And while there's some truth in that, being assertive is often a good response, but when you just send your child back into that situation without further information, it could possibly cause more harm. So a more effective response is, to use, again, the student action plan that we're going to talk about, to brainstorm options with your child about what you guys can do as a team to respond to the situation. Sometimes we tell our children, just ignore the bully, just don't pay attention to them. And as we all know, that's easier said than done. They probably have tried, ignoring the situation. That's usually a typical response for children. But if that method, would have been effective, there wouldn't be a need for them to ask for your help. So it's very difficult for a student to ignore somebody, sitting behind them on the bus or right next to them in class or at the same lunch table. So sometimes also if the student who is doing the bullying realizes that their target is, purposefully ignoring them, that can actually ignite the bullying even more because they know they're already getting a reaction out of you. So sometimes that purposeful ignoring is a reaction, and that's exactly what they're looking for. That gives them that power and that control that they seek. So it might encourage them to continue to bully even more. When we tell, or when we, as a parent, take the matter into our own hand, that, I know, again, as Lana had mentioned, I do have a son who has autism, and that would definitely be my first instinct is, to call up that parent and, yell at them about why is their child bullying my child. But sometimes that can, that can cause the situation to get a little worse. Remember when, your child tells you about bullying, they're looking for the parent to guide them to a solution that helps them feel empowered and it helps involve them in the process. So typically calling the other parent or, directly confronting the student who's bullying, it can be ineffective. So it's best to work through the school and implement the steps to respond. Children, they may not always realize that they're being bullied. They might think it's bullying only if they're being physically hurt, and they might think that the other child is just joking around, or they might not understand, those social norms and cues, especially our kiddos who do have some special needs. They may not understand that they're being bullied. So children can benefit from a definition of the differences between, friendly behavior and bullying. Basically just explaining to kids that if a behavior hurts them or harms them, either emotionally or physically, it's bullying. So parents of children who are not willing to communicate about being bullied or don't have the skills to effectively communicate, they might need to, watch for changes in their child's behavior. So if you have a child who, normally is really happy, they love getting on the bus every morning, and then all of a sudden, they're begging for a ride to school, they don't want to get on the bus, that might be, an indicator that they're being bullied. So some things to look for, if you see a student not wanting to go to school, wanting to stay home, if you see them, being really anxious about school or having some of those physical symptoms, those stomach aches, headaches, if you see them kind of withdrawing from their friends or just withdrawing from, school, if you see damage to their personal belongings, so again, if you see, they come home and they don't have their backpack or, their pencils have been broken or, just some damage to their personal belongings. If you see a change in their sleep routine or, the way that they're acting, you might need to talk to them a little bit to see if maybe there's something going on. And some things that you can ask to see, if about the bullying, you can ask them if they thought that the other student hurt them on purpose, or it has happened more than once. How did it make them feel? Did it make them feel bad or angry? Did the other student know that they were hurting them? Because, again, that intent to harm is one of those definitions in the bullying definition. And is the other student more powerful than them? Are they bigger? Are they scarier? Are they older? Are they in a higher grade? Sometimes, I have a child who really may not be able to answer those direct questions. So you might have to go about it in a different way. So you can ask them, how was your bus ride today? Or who did you sit by at lunch? Or, I've noticed you've been wanting to stay home from school a lot. Please tell me about that. What's going on? You can come right on and ask them, are kids making fun of you? Or are there a lot of cliques at school? What do you think about that? So just, kind of think about things that might make it difficult for a child to recognize bullying behavior, and what might keep some kids from, not telling about it. So one of the things that we're really trying to encourage is that self-advocacy, to let the students know, you're not alone. A lot of our kiddos may feel like they're the only ones who are being bullied and that no one cares. So making sure that they understand that, other kiddos have gone through this, and there are people in your life who do care about this, that really encourages them, to take those self-advocacy steps. Make sure they know, too, it's not up to them alone to stop the bullying. It's never the responsibility of the child to change what's happening to them. And yes, bullying does happen to a lot of kids, but that never makes it right. So let your child know that bullying happens, in all kinds of schools. It happens in small schools, big schools, all the way from preschool to college, heck, even into adulthood. So make sure that they understand that, yes, a lot of kiddos do go through it. They're not alone with that, but it's just, it's not okay. Never makes it right. Make sure they know that no one deserves to be bullied. Everyone deserves respect, no matter what. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And we all need to work together. Everyone's responsible for addressing bullying. The community, the schools, parents, and students, we all play a role in it. Let your child know that all students, every student in the school has a right to be safe at school, and expect the adults to keep them safe and assert that right when they're being bullied. Students should know that, if one adult isn't able to help, don't give up. Don't stop there. It's their right to talk with another adult. So, when you speak to a teacher or an administrator or someone you trust at school, you can share the information that we're going to talk about again, that student action plan. And you can ask, it's your right to ask, what can be done to help keep me safe and other kids at the school safe? So, they definitely can be assertive when it comes to bullying. Again, just to note, it's not the child's responsibility to protect him or herself. The community, parents, and schools, all of us must play a role in keeping our children safe. So here we're going to talk about some potential strategies that a child can use to avoid bullying situations or prevent the behavior from continuing. And this is a good thing to talk with your child about, since it can be difficult to implement, and the success will depend on your child's comfort level and their abilities. If these strategies fit with your child's abilities and strengths, then they can ultimately help build that self-confidence and the resilience. Remind your child that if they're being bullied, that they need to tell an adult. So we need to report the situation. It's never something that they need to address on their own. And reporting is done to protect either themselves or someone else. So if no one knows about it, no one's going to be able to help them. The first adult to tell is the parent. And then the next is someone at school. So this can be done, by your child, by you as the parent, or together you guys can, go to the school to report the situation. Also let them know to move away from the bully or the situation. As soon as they recognize the potential for bullying, they should move away from the situation. So you can develop a plan with your child, where should they go? So is there, a teacher that they trust or another room somewhere public that they can get away from the situation? Because often moving away from a situation, like on the bus or in a bathroom or classroom, it's not possible. So talking about the logistics with your child can help them prepare for that. So if you know the bullying is happening and one of these types of situations, explore additional intervention strategies. Some situations that may not help the bullying is, telling your child to fight back. It's usually a poor idea to respond physically, to fight back or with some verbal aggression, because this can just perpetuate the behavior and it can lead to other issues. Most of the time we've all seen that where, a student finally fights back and then they're suspended right along with the other student. Also, just kind of to point out, I know in our school's policy, once you respond to it, if you respond back to it, if you physically respond or verbally, aggressively respond, it's no longer bullying. It's now considered conflict. So it changes the behavior a little bit. Also, calling the parent of the child who's bullying, that should really be discouraged because it's emotionally charged. And as I said earlier, I'm a mama bear when it comes to my baby. So I think that might make the situation worse because they don't think it would be communicating very effectively at that point. So the better recourse is to work with school administrators to address the consequences for bullying behavior and to encourage school-wide awareness that bullying will not be tolerated. And again, in those bullying policies, your school should have something in place where they're training not only the adults in the school, but also the children, what bullying is, what it looks like, how you can avoid that situation. So definitely check out your school's policy to see what it includes. This is the student action plan. This was one of the attachments that was sent to you guys. And the reason that I really enjoy it is because it's really important to involve your child in the decision-making process about how to handle the bullying, if your child has those skills. And it can provide them with a sense of control over the situation and help them realize that you're willing to listen to them and you're willing to take action, and it reassures them that their opinions and ideas are important. It's a very simple form, so I've used this with a couple of families already, and it just helps you to define the situation. So define, what are you calling bullying? What is going on? And then it encourages you to think about how the situation could be different, and then writing down the steps to take. What action is going to take to try and solve this situation. Now we're going to talk a little bit about cyberbullying, and just to define it, it's the use of technology to harass, hurt, embarrass, humiliate, or intimidate another person. And why it's so dangerous is, it can be done anonymously. So it makes it easy for one child to hurt another child and not be held accountable for it. So, or to see the impact of their actions. And because technology, it reaches a wider audience, and it's not just the person who's targeted that sees it, so the effects of it can be devastating. In fact, when Cathy was talking earlier, the harmful effects and the suicides that have happened due to bullying, most of that revolves around that cyberbullying because it reaches such a wide audience. And it can take place in many ways. So you might have some young people who have actually created websites to bully another child, or they post embarrassing pictures on Facebook, or I don't even think the kids use Facebook anymore. That's Snapchat and all of that. They might send threatening messages over the internet. And I know that some students have used blogging as a way to encourage, their friends to gang up on another child. So here's a way to try and address cyberbullying with your child. First and foremost, talk to them about it. Open the subject for discussion and let your child know that you want them to use their phones, their computers, and be online with their friends. But just like in school, they deserve to be safe from bullying online. So let them know that if something is happening online and it's hurtful to them, that is bullying, and it's important that they let you know. Set cyber safety rules. You set rules for your child in the physical world, so you need to do the same in the cyber world. And a couple of good guidelines are, don't do or say anything online that you wouldn't do or say in person. And don't reveal anything online that you wouldn't tell a stranger. So again, that being anonymous can kind of loosen those inhibitions a little bit. So just make sure that they know that that is public. So don't say anything that you wouldn't say to, if somebody was sitting right across from you. And also encourage them not to give out, their email password or any personal data. And putting personal information out there, a person bullying could use that information to harass you in a lot of ways. And don't share too many, personal details. So, if you keep an online diary, somebody could use that against you. They can use that to ridicule you. And, as far as like instant messaging, not sharing your account password with anyone, even your best friend. That friend could share it with others, and then, you get mad at each other. That happens a lot in middle school, and that friendship ends. Now all of your private messages could suddenly become public. So, and then a cyber bully, with your password can sign on, pretend to be you, behave inappropriately. So it can just lead to a lot of mess. So make sure your kiddos know, just that safety when they're online. And while privacy is important, safety is more important. So as a parent, you have a responsibility to know what your child's doing online. Establish rules about your access to your child's cell phones, their text history, social networking sites. I always share the story how my 15-year-old son, I randomly check his phone once a week, and I scroll through the text messages. I will randomly sign onto his Facebook account and check those private messages. And I understand he has a right to privacy, but again, his safety is more important to me, and we just really keep a close eye on that. We also try and keep, our child's computer in an open area, so like in the living room, in the family room, so where you can supervise that activity. You can decide if there's going to be limits on access to using technology or communicating with peers, such as, no computer or texting after 9 p.m. or during meals. And if you discover that your child is experiencing cyberbullying, document it by printing the emails or web pages, saving electronic copies, and contacting your child's school or the police. As I mentioned earlier, being a school board member, we did have a couple of cases where parents were smart and they printed out, Facebook posts about their children before anybody could delete it. So that can be excellent documentation of a situation if you need it. So what happens when your child is the bully? They're the ones who are committing the bullying acts. What can you do as a parent? First and foremost, again, talk to them. Find out why are they bullying. You might explore how your child's feeling about him or herself. So ask if they're being bullied, and invite that discussion about bullying. Cathy had mentioned earlier reactive bullying. So, see if they were being bullied themselves, if that's why they're now doing it to somebody else. Consider if it might be the result of a disability. Sometimes children with disabilities, they might bully other children, and other times children with certain behavioral disorders or limited social skills, they may act in ways that are mistaken for bullying. So if your child with a disability is bullying, you may want to include bullying prevention goals in his or her IEP. And we'll talk a little bit later about how to use the IEP for bullying prevention. You can, often our children who bully, they lack awareness of how it impacts others. They may not understand how it's affecting someone else. So trying to understand your child's feelings and help your child understand how others feel when they're being bullied. Let your child know that everyone has feelings and that other people's feelings do matter. Letting your child know that bullying is not okay under any circumstance and you will not tolerate it. So make your expectations very clear and take immediate action if you learn that they have been involved in a bullying incident. And be very clear and consistent about the consequences for the bullying. Be specific about what will happen if it continues. A lot of our schools, and I know you guys are from all over, but in our area, a lot of our schools do use positive behavior intervention supports. You might hear it called PBIS. That model, it can be used even at home as a very effective tool to help address bullying, help to address these behaviors. You can teach by example, so modeling nonviolent behavior and encouraging cooperative play. Help your child learn different ways to resolve conflict and deal with feelings such as anger, insecurity, or frustration, and teach and reward that appropriate behavior. Again, that PBIS, those positive behavior interventions, can be very helpful when doing that. Role play, so and kind of just act out different situations with your child, how they may react in certain situations. Providing positive feedback, so when they have done well, when they make good choices, making sure that they're rewarded for that. And that can just be a lot more effective than what we traditionally consider punishment. Using positive reinforcement can be more helpful. And be realistic. It's not going to change overnight. It might take a little bit for your child's behavior to change. Just make sure that they know, through that process that you love and support them. But be realistic about that. And if you can't handle it on your own, definitely reach out to your child's doctor, the school principal, psychologist, anybody you have on your team that can be helpful. We're going to talk briefly about the role of an active bystander. As I mentioned earlier with Girls on the Run, we talk about this and we talk about it being a stand-byer and not a bystander, so being an active bystander. And some things that, an important bullying prevention strategy is educating those who are witnessing the bullying. 10 to 15% of students bully, and 10 to 15% of students are the victims of the bullying. So this leaves about 70 to 80% of students who have the potential to witness that bullying. And some of these bystanders could be your children. So it's important to make sure they understand the role that they can play in changing the culture of bullying and ending bullying situations. And some things that they can do to make things better could be spending time with the students who are bullied and trying to get students who are bullied away from the situation, listening to them, listening to students who have been bullied if they're sharing their feelings about it, and telling the student that no one deserves to be bullied. Bystanders who witness bullying impact the situation in powerful ways, and often their influence, they can influence the situation with their actions. So some bystanders can react in a positive manner and they're helpful, and others can sometimes negatively contribute to the situation. So hurtful bystanders, they're the ones who instigate the bullying, the ones who are sitting there recording it and then putting it on YouTube. They encourage the bullying by laughing or cheering or making comments that further encourage the bully. They might join in the bullying once it's already began, and they might passively accept the bullying by watching and doing nothing. And often without realizing it, these bystanders contribute to the problem by providing the audience a bully craves and the silent acceptance that allows bullies to continue their hurtful behavior. So helpful bystanders, they can play a key role in preventing or stopping bullying. Sometimes they might directly intervene by discouraging the bullying, defending the victim, or redirecting the situation away from the bullying. Other bystanders, they can go get help or rally the support from peers to stand up against the bullying or report the bullying to adults. And some students, they may refrain from intervening because they might think, it's not my business, or they might be scared of getting hurt or becoming the victim, of the bullying. They may not feel like they have any power to stop it. They might think, that the victim deserves it, and they don't want to draw attention to themselves. They might fear retribution. Again, they might think that adults won't help, or if they tell, it's just going to make it worse, or they simply just may not know what to do. So bystanders who don't intervene or don't report bullying, they often suffer negative consequences themselves from it, and they might feel pressure to participate in the bullying, or they might have anxiety about speaking to anyone about the bullying. They might feel powerless. They might feel vulnerable to becoming the victim, and they might have fear of associating with the victim, the bully, or the bully's friends, and they might feel guilty for not they didn't defend the victim. Okay, now we're going to switch gears and cover our last part. We're going to talk specifically about parents of children who have disabilities, and what we might be able to do, what the school's responsibilities are, and how we can use the IEP to help advocate. So by the numbers, and as a parent of a student with special needs, these numbers are frightening to me. To know that there's only been a few studies that have looked at children with disabilities and bullying incidences, but again, the numbers are scary. In a study in the British Journal of Learning Support, they found much higher rates of bullying in children with special needs, and the researchers indicated that 60% of students with special needs reported being bullied, compared to only 25% of the general student population. Researchers discovered that students with disabilities were more worried about school safety and being injured or harassed by other peers compared to students without a disability. And in the journal Developmental Medicine and Child Neurology, children with special needs or a disability are 10 times more likely to be bullied than the typical student. And it's alarming, considering current federal statistics show that 15 to 25% of typical school-age children are bullied with some frequency. So 10 times that amount when you're a student with a disability. And the National Autistic Society reports that 40% of children with autism and 60% of children with Asperger's syndrome have experienced bullying. So what are the school's duties? When children are at school, their safety is the responsibility of school personnel. And school districts, they have a legal responsibility to respond to disability harassment allegations. So we've been talking this whole presentation about bullying, and this part kind of covers more with harassment. The difference is harassment can be one single incident. But if it's something that can be assessed for civil rights implications, so if it's, if the abusive behavior is on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, or disability, and it creates a hostile environment, a school is obligated to respond in accordance with applicable federal civil rights statutes and regulations enforced by the Office of Civil Rights. And when the behavior implicates the civil rights laws, school administrators should look beyond simply disciplining the perpetrators. While disciplining them, it's likely a necessary step, it's often insufficient. So a school's responsibility is to eliminate the hostile environment created by the harassment. They have to address its effects and take steps to ensure that harassment does not recur. So put differently, the unique effects of discriminatory harassment may demand a different response than with other types of bullying. Just looked at the time, so we're going to quickly go through some things that the school has a responsibility of. They have to investigate it and determine if it happened. It has to be prompt and thorough and impartial. They have to interview the targeted students, the offending students, witnesses. They have to communicate with the targeted students what they're going to do to end the harassment, and they have to check in with them to make sure that the harassment has stopped. And when an investigation reveals that harassment has occurred, the school needs to take steps reasonably calculated to end the harassment, including they have to eliminate any hostile environment, they have to prevent it from happening again, and they have to prevent retaliation against the targeted student or the person who filed a complaint. So some things that they could do, they can develop or revise their policy regarding harassment. They can make sure that the individuals have contact information for Title IX, Section 504, for their coordinators. They can, train the staff so that they know better how to identify when harassment has occurred. They can discipline the harassers. They can limit the interaction between the two students. They can provide the harassed student with, additional opportunity to obtain benefit that was denied. So like if they were taking a test or, it interfered with a class, they can give them an opportunity to retake the test or retake the class. They can provide services that was denied. They can, make statements that the school will not tolerate harassment and will respond to any student who reports such conduct. They can conduct school climate surveys, so kind of getting a feel of what the students in the school feel the climate is. And they can involve parents in that process and the community as well. So in the IEP, you can address bullying and harassment in the IEP. And remember that every child receiving special education is entitled to FAPE, that free appropriate public education. And bullying sometimes can become an obstacle to receiving that education. So the IEP team, which also includes the parents, it can identify evidence-based strategies that may be written into the IEP to help stop the bullying. And it may be helpful to involve the child when appropriate in the decision making. So some things that we can do, we can identify an adult in the school who the child can report to or go to for assistance. We can determine how school staff will document and report the incidents. We can allow the child to leave class early to avoid hallway incidents. We can hold separate in-services for school staff and classroom peers to help them understand a child's disability. You can put in there educating peers about school district policies on bullying behavior and ensuring regular reassurance from the school staff to the student that he or she has a right to be safe and that the bullying is not their fault. The student can be shadowed. The student who's been bullied, they can be shadowed by school staff in the hallways, classrooms, and playgrounds, again, just to make sure that they're safe. And you can have separate in-services for school staff and classroom peers to help them understand the disability. If a parent feels that their child has been denied the right to FAPE due to bullying, they can definitely file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, and this that link will lead you to the letter that talks about filing a complaint if you feel that your child has been denied FAPE due to bullying incidents. So again, just a reminder that bullying prevention is everyone's responsibility. So it's not just the child who's being bullied, it's all of our responsibility, our communities, our teachers, our schools, parents. It's all of our responsibility to help prevent bullying of our children. So just to summarize, steps that you can take: talking to your child, keeping records using those template letters that we sent you guys, encourage self-advocacy using that student action plan, problem solve at the lowest level, so understand your chain of command within your school systems, and ask to see the district policy. Again, we all had to have our policies updated, I believe it was by October of last year, so your school district should have an updated policy on bullying. And that is what should be guiding their responses when it comes to bullying reports. Some local resources. The Department of Education does have some great bullying prevention strategies on their website. As Cathy spoke about earlier, we did send you some resources, but there are a ton more on our website at insource.org. There's also more information at Indiana Protection and Advocacy Services on their website, as well as the Marion County Commission on Youth, and all of those websites are listed there for you. The PACER Center that developed this training, they do have an awesome Facebook page, so if you're on Facebook or Twitter, I'm not on Twitter, but Facebook, their Facebook page is wonderful. During the month of October, I believe it is the National Bullying Prevention Month. Every day they post a tip on bullying prevention, which I thought was really cool. There's also an option to where you can go with your kiddos and sign the petition, "The End of Bullying Begins with Me." I found it to be a great tool to have, just that conversation about bullying with my children. Neither of them have hopefully, cross my fingers, they have experienced bullying. They have not discussed that with me, but it was a great way to have that conversation with them without, directly addressing bullying. So it was a great tool. And then we would just like to give special thanks to Jody Manning from the Pacers National Bullying Prevention Center and IPAS, as well as the Marion County Commission on Youth, for helping to put this training together and allowing us to use the great material to educate all of you and everyone else we come in contact with. So thank you. Okay. And now I'm going to give it back to Lana.
Thank you so much, Cathy and Tony. That was very good information, very informative, not only for parents, but for those of us that are working with children with special needs, and possibly that comes up in a conversation at a team meeting. We would then be able to refer parents onto these websites and provide them with some of this information to help them address that in their school system. So thank you so very much for the presentation today. We're going to go ahead and take some time to ask some questions. So I will open those up. If you have any questions now, please feel free to type them in. This will be available, the recording of this presentation will be available on our website. We will also be sending out the handouts again in an email when you receive that confirmation email. So you will have all of this information. There is a question about the specific presentation that Cathy, you and Tony presented, if the actual PDF version of that is available somewhere. The recording, we obviously will have the recording of this, but just the presentation, would that be available somewhere?
You're talking about the actual PowerPoint as opposed to the 3-slide per page handout. Yes. That is proprietary information, so I mean we would have to get consent from I'm not quite sure whom, but just the handouts. If someone is interested in having us do that presentation for their group, we would certainly be happy to make that happen, if that would be helpful.
Sure. I would just they could direct any inquiries about additional trainings maybe for their group to you, Cathy?
That is correct. My email is cboswell, B as in boy, OSWELL, @insource.org, cboswell@insource.org. If you're interested in having that presentation for your group, we would be happy to make that happen for you.
Okay, great. Then I see that we have another question. It's kind of more of a comment that I don't know if Cathy or Tony would want to speak to this, related to that, what we've talked about today is related to children or students bullying each other, but situations in which a child perceives that they are being bullied by an adult, such as a teacher or another professional. Are there, do you know, also resources available for that type of concern?
Cathy, can I answer that?
Absolutely.
Again, from the school board perspective, within our policy, we did have protections. It was 0 tolerance for bullying, period. So whether that was from student to student or adult to adult within our school staff or adult to student, if you believe that that is occurring, I would still use that template letter and adapt it as necessary and report it just like you would if it was from student to student. There should be, 0 tolerance for bullying no matter who is doing that bullying. So they would still need to investigate that just as they would with any other incident, even if it, if it was just student to student.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. There is also a comment that says Indiana's next step should be to pass bullying legislation in the workplace. There probably definitely is much of that goes on as well, so that's a very good comment.
Actually, sometimes what we call bullying in children, and I think I mentioned this earlier, if it were to happen between adults, it might in fact be considered to be criminal behavior. And so, you know, nobody should be subject to bullying in whatever form it might take. There should be, most companies have a policy of some sort for reporting, though I know that sometimes folks are reluctant to use it. You know, like anything else, keep good documentation of the events, the names, the times, the place, and there should be a policy for who do you report that to. And if it rises to the level of harassment, especially if it's a person with a disability or, you know, of a protected class, you know, gender, race, or disability, it could actually be reported to the Office of Civil Rights as a civil rights violation. So that could potentially be a route to take. But I would definitely check with, you know, your human resources folks and find out. And again, when you're in a job, it's a little dicier because sometimes there's concern about fallout from that, and if that's going to come back on you for reporting. But nobody, no matter what age, deserves to be bullied or harassed.
Absolutely. We had a comment thanking you for the straightforward, much-needed look and information about bullying. So again, just echoing my sentiments as well, that this was very good information for all of us, and we truly do appreciate you both taking your time today to share this information with us. I am not seeing any other questions, so I'll give everybody just another second to type any in if you have any last-minute questions. But just to reiterate this, you should be receiving confirmation of your attendance within a day. If you do not, then you can contact IPMG and we'll take care of that for you. Sometimes there's always a little glitch here or there, but you should be receiving confirmation of attendance within the next day via email at the email address that you use to register. And that then will also include information that was presented today with the handouts that also will be posted on our website. So you're welcome to go to that. There will also be a link to InSource on our website, so you can go directly there and access some of the information and handouts in that way as well. This again is available to case managers to submit to Advocare for 1.5 training credits. If you're not for sure how to do that, such as you're a newer case manager and you've not yet participated in a professional development workshop, definitely talk to your manager. They can go over those instructions with you. They are also located in Advocare, the instructions for submitting. It's very easy. You're just going to print or save the confirmation email and then attach that in Advocare to receive the 1.5 external training credit hours. I'm not seeing any additional questions, so thank you everyone for your attendance today, and again thank you to Cathy and Tony and InSource for sharing this information with us. We truly do appreciate it. Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.